Chapter 87 Ants in a Tree. The son Li Hongqing waited for a long time, found himself to wait for the person has not yet come, cannot help but laugh to oneself, thought this Fan Gongzi frame is really big, this dynasty and the civil and military officials have the qualification to let their own wait, there are not a few. A thought will think of these things in the capital, secretly admire this Fan Xian into the capital not long, make a commotion is not small, throw out a few poems to provoke the literary world's small vibration. The middle of the night to hit a person will provoke the officialdom in the shock, as for the marriage with the Prime Minister's illegitimate daughter, but also let qualified to know the inside story of the heart of the people shocked. Thinking about it, Fan Xian had already shouted up from a long distance, saluting on one side and walking over quickly on the other. He didn't mean to let the son wait, just that he was discussing some things about the bookstore with the shopkeeper of Qingyu Hall earlier, so he was delayed. The two young men sat down across the table, sipped a few mouthfuls of tea, and then began to talk business. The first to speak was of course Fan Xian, who had to thank the other for what happened that night. Listening to him say thank you, son Li Hongqing laughed, said warmly, I thought at that time, we know each other only a few days, how can you afford to pack the whole boat drunken immortal residence to entertain me? It turns out that you are stored in the heart of this idea. But no harm, Guobaoquan, the guy is a straw man, in the prince's house, also not ranked what name, just the family is not a good place to go. The name of Guobaoquan, and the prince's warden, also can't be ranked, just that the old man at home still has some learning, you hit then hit, where there is a need to turn so many sub-bends. Fan Xian knew that his son was referring to his own actions in the courtroom, and laughed to himself, isn't this inexperienced? If I had known that hitting someone in Kyoto would be this easy, I would have punched them in the garden of the royal residence. Li Hongqing bluffed and hurriedly shipped the small silk and gold fan in his hand. That can't be allowed. If things are done too out of the ordinary, it's not good for me to step in to protect you. Fan Xian laughed and thanked him again before asking what his son had ordered today. Li Hongqing pondered for a while and said, I can't hide this from you, and based on the friendship between our two families, I have to make things clear. Originally, the second prince wanted me to swindle you into meeting him, to seek a natural meeting, so as not to cause you to be disgusted, but this is still cheating you, so I explicitly said that tomorrow the second prince will set up a banquet on the flowing Crystal River, and will invite you exclusively, and I will just be an accompaniment. Fan Xian frowned and said, this I really don't understand. How honorable is the status of the second prince? I'm a district scholar, where can I get into his eyes? Do you really not understand, or are you pretending to understand? Li Hongqing pointed at his nose and laughed loudly, to make a play like you, it's really a failure. Fan Xian smiled awkwardly, but did not reply. Li Hongqing noticed that there were no people around the flower hall, and said with a straight face, still, I felt happy when I first saw your face, so I couldn't bear to hide it from you. And it seems to me that this kind of tactic doesn't inevitably make you and me different. You also know that although His Majesty is still in the prime of his life, the so-called things that are not far-fetched must have near worries. So the eyes of all the people in the court are always looking at those royal sons. The eldest prince is a natural martial artist, but he leads the troops outside. Although the crown prince is the queen's own son, but has always been bad behavior. Although my Jing royal house is impartial, to tell you the truth, among these princes, my friendship with the second prince is better. Fan Xian was startled, thinking that this whole thing was completely different from what he had expected. In his previous life, when watching the February River, those princes speak all the simple words to the complexity of the words, cannot wait to put on 80 pieces of clothing, in order not to fall into the mouth of the truth. Which is like the one in front of this, the opening on the words to pick out the obvious, the matter of the first wife, it is to lose their heads, how dare you run naked and wildly call it. Seems to find their own words will be scared of the other side. Li Hongqing embarrassed smile, is it too much for me to say too blunt? To be honest, I don't know why, but when I look at you, I don't want to play with that kind of nonsense. Yes, I'm trying to get you on behalf of the second prince, and this is the same as marrying a man, it's always a deal that you and I are willing to make. Fan Xian was stunned, looking at Shizi's clean eyes, as if he wanted to see something hidden in them. He couldn't tell whether the other party was really a gentleman with a heart as clear as the moon, or a scheming minister who would use openness and honesty as a means of gathering people's hearts and minds. But in any case, the son of the world has stood clear camp. Running naked is not a problem. District small fan idol in the capital neither power and no one hands is absolutely not dare to take off their clothes and the other side to hold the bladder. Smiled and said, I can clearly know, the second prince why want to see me. For that marriage in October. Li Hongqing still appeared to be honest and looked over with a smile. After next year's great competition, if you show the appropriate ability, His Majesty will hand over the management of those industries to you. For us, this is a great thing. First of all, there will be much less silver money coming into the accounts over there, and some things will be inconvenient to do. On the other hand, I believe that Lord Sananbo has been in charge of the Ministry of Accounts of Qing for many years, and must understand that when the old and the new take over, you must need to check out the previous accounts, and in this way, there might be some unexpected benefits. Fan Xian was silent, his eyebrows drooping, but he did not look disheveled, instead giving off a very peaceful and harmless feeling. He said softly, it's still early, the wedding isn't until October, and I'll really have to wait until next year or the year after that to get access to those things. Yeah, so tomorrow is just for dinner. Li Hongqing looked at him seriously. How about treating it as a return gift to me for what happened last time? You also know that I'm saying these things today because I really trust you. Maybe you'll have some new ideas tomorrow when you see the second prince. Fan Xian smiled, thinking that the battle between the second prince and the crown prince would not really begin until more than 10 years later, and now he was even pulling the strings of such an unassuming guy like himself, which was really a bit of a revolt. Starts with the children's feeling, so he answered, and then sent his son out of the mansion. Back to his father's study, he sat on the chair next to the desk, staring at the pens and the quill, frowning tightly, constantly thinking. That time when he beat up Guobaoquan, he chose the Prince of Jing as a cover. He was gifting the other party a chance to pull himself in, because in order to survive in Kyoto, he had to stand on a good team. His father could always stand on His Majesty's side, but he had also said that things in the future were always a matter for the younger generation. If Fan Xian wants to stand in line, he doesn't have to stand on the second princess side, but he will definitely stand on the opposite side of the crown prince. The reason was very simple. For years ago the empress had wanted to die herself, and 4 years later, these people in the palace would still want to die themselves. And oneself in the Kyoto like deep sea, seems to be just a small ant that will be flicked to death at any time. Will you, the ant, go up the tree? The location of the second prince's banquet is still on the flowing Crystal River. Fan Xian heard this location and laughed bitterly. Recently this period of time every day with one air night consumed in a place, although sweet and savory occasionally. Skin contact is too little. After all, is the real fiancé so shy, he is not too wanton. When I think of that night under his own soft as jade body, Fan Xian immediately remembered the name of the other party, Silili. The heart cannot help but some swing, secretly recalled the past life of the European Middle Ages, those with intestines as a condom of the mighty, in fact, how to operate, and then thought of the day of the lawsuit, why this woman will be so coincidental to leave the Kyoto. The law and order in Kyoto has always been great, except for the recent addition of a guy from the Fan family who makes black fists. Therefore, the Fan family's carriage only had 4 guards beside it, and slowly drove towards the west of the city under the spring light. After passing through Wanchun Gate, and then walking through the Oxen Street where he had ambushed and beaten people, Fan Xian lifted the curtain and smiled. Fuji Zijing and the other 4 guards, there were 3 of them who had gone through the events of that day, and when they heard the young master laughing, they naturally knew what he was laughing at, and with a burst of joy in their hearts, they laughed as well. There aren't many houses around the Nyolan Street, but there are some stores that have fallen into disrepair many years ago, so it got a different name, Lost Door Shop. It's very quiet here, no matter during the day or at night. There aren't many pedestrians, so it can be said that it's the best place to stop the street and knock on the door. Fan Xian put his head out of the curtain, looking at the large sycamore leaves slowly receding backward, looking at the sky above, thinking about how to deal with the second prince after meeting him. The other side should be very clear about his father's strength. I don't think he will make any excessive demands, probably just contact feelings, for the things that may happen only after 10 years, to do the padding only. As he was walking, Fan Xian's brows suddenly furrowed, and for some reason, his senses were a bit off, as if he felt that there was something odd around him. He looked around the area where the carriage was passing by and realized that it was quiet and there was nothing out of the ordinary. Suddenly, he twitched his nose and smelled an extremely faint sweet odor. This was the smell of bitter endurance alkali, an arrow poison extracted from one of the favorite frogs of the Western barbarians. "Spread out!" Fan Xian shouted, his body already jumping out of the car window first, grabbing the nearest guard with one hand without seeing who it was. Although the training he had received since he was a child had made his sense of smell exceptionally sensitive, but since he could even smell this strange fragrance, it meant that the archer was already close to this carriage of his, and this assassination without any warning was about to begin. Just at the moment he jumped off the carriage, a large rock was thrown from the back of the alley, whistling with the wind, ruthlessly hitting the carriage, which was scattered into countless pieces of broken wood and splashed into the air.